Okay, the issue then is that we are wanting to invest ourselves in the fulfillment of God's intention. What is God's vision for our territory, your territory? Well, you know, when we start asking God what his vision is, we will get a better understanding of what needs to happen for that vision to be fulfilled. And one of the things that's being spoken around a bit more now is the idea of a thing called wig take. What would it take? What's it going to take to see a movement of God that would see 500,000 people, I'm talking about the Canberra region, reached in the space of a generation? Maybe that's 20 years. It's probably more now, but regardless of that, what would it take to see that? Well, if we do what we've been doing up until now, we know we won't. We will not. If we do what we keep on doing, what we've been doing, even the most successful churches have not seen an increase in the percentage, and we're actually losing ground. You know, so we're shoving people around, we're shifting deck chairs on the Titanic and all that kind of stuff. But the issue is, what do we need to do? What's it going to take to actually see a movement of God? If God has intended this, then God must be able to enable this. And then if he's called the church to this, if he's called his followers to this, the followers of Jesus, Jesus said to all the disciples, all of you go into all of the world and preach the gospel to every person, all for all and every. So that's what God has said. I'm not going to change that. I don't want to change that, because I know the heart of God is in that. And I know the capacity or the ability of God is in that. So I just need to simply embrace what God has said. And so we've seen how generations after generations, you know, there's been wonderful things happening in all kinds of places, in all kinds of ways. And I'm not now here just to criticize everybody else. And I'm the last one that's going to do that, because I'm not successful, you know, in my own right. And so I'm not saying I have the answer because I'm doing all this. I'm heading in a direction, but I want to tell you, I want to do what God has said he wants to do. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. That was what Jesus said with respect to the harvest. That is the gospel being proclaimed to every person. And so if we look at the models around now and tweak those models, we're still not going to get it. But I want to draw your attention to the most prolific disciple-producing, church-producing movement that is happening in the world. It's happening under the heading of a number of different things, disciple-making movements, or church-planting movements, disciple-multiplying movements, whatever you want to call that. Training for T4T is another expression of that. And all these things, something that's been going on since the late 80s and 90s, but has taken much more become much more established in the last 20 years or 15 or 20 years. So now around the world there are more than 1,300 researched, counted, genuinely researched movements. And these movements are where disciples are being rapidly multiplying. Not just a person coming to Christ, joining a church, but a person coming to Christ, then their family coming to Christ, then their village coming to Christ, then, you know, through generations, and not only generations of disciples, but generations of churches. And this movement has now produced, in the last 20 years or so, 74 million new believers. It has been produced through the planting of 4.7 million new churches. There have been genuinely counted, up to 40 generations of believers, commonly 4 to 10 generations of believers, and as many generations of churches. Believers producing believers, multiplication, not first generation addition, but multiplication. And because of this, now, you know, we see the Bhojpuri example, which has been going on for 20 years, and now we see that there's 10 to 12 million people, thousands of churches, new churches there. And this is actually not being done by a single name person. It's being done by each person doing their job, which sounds awfully biblical to me. And so I'm going to talk about this in the next video, because because they've researched all of this, you know, it's happening in China, in India, in Africa, in South America, and so forth, mostly in mono-ethnic, rural areas. That's the truth. But now more and more happening in urban areas. We need to learn from these people. We need to learn from our brothers and sisters in the two-thirds world, in the non-Western world, because these people are doing amazing things, and they're doing this in the midst of great persecution and difficulty. These things are happening in previously unreached people groups where missionaries have been there and so forth for a long time. So we need to go and sit at their feet, listen to what they say, and I'm going to give you a list of all the things that have been researched that are common to all of these movements. 1,300 of them now. So what about one for Canberra, where we want to see a movement of God that in the Canberra region that will bring the gospel of the kingdom to every person by 2035, in obedience to the command of Jesus. Join me then.